Silence in the room just swallowed Sarah whole. Every second dragged, heavy with unpaid bills, missed calls, and that relentless ticking clock. 3 months' rent overdue, no options left, just one last breath. Then, a knock. A sharp, cold knock, hard, undeniable. It was him. Mr. Mason, her landlord. His gaze always lingered too long. Like he could strip away every layer with just one look. She hated him, but couldn't escape. She opened the door, breath caught in her throat. He stood there, tall, his calculating eyes sweeping over her. 3 months, he said, his voice ice cold. Her voice trembled. I just need a little more time. He walked in without waiting. The room seemed to shrink. Feeling cramped, his presence just took up all the space. Time doesn't pay debts, he said softly, his voice like velvet but sharp. Her heart pounded. She had nothing left to give. Just one weak plea. Please, just a little more. He looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. Or maybe, there's another way. Her stomach clenched. She knew exactly what he was going to suggest. What are you suggesting? She whispered. His smile twisted. Something dangerous in it. Just between us. The room felt hot. The air heavy. Her body was paralyzed. But her mind screamed. She didn't want this. Didn't need it. But between them, only silence. Stretching out, she felt like she was about to shatter. She nodded. A simple, desperate gesture. Mr. Mason's smile grew more satisfied. He stepped closer. Not for money, but to take hold of her robe. The decision was made. And there was no going back. Mr. Mason moved in close. His hand touching the tie on her robe. Pulling gently. Sarah stood there, frozen. Her eyes were fixed on his hand. Her heart hammering in her chest. She wanted to run, to scream, but her throat felt squeezed shut. Unable to utter a sound. He smiled faintly, a self-satisfied smirk, as if he'd anticipated everything. Sarah felt cold sweat start to trickle down her forehead. She felt backed into a corner. No way out. Don't worry, he said softly, as if to reassure her. But honestly, his words just made her more frantic. This will all be over. Just a transaction. Sarah. She wanted to resist, but his eyes never left her. That look seeming to absorb all her hidden secrets. All her resistance. All her worry. It all vanished before the power he held. She felt herself retreating, step by step, like prey being hunted. Mr. Mason wasn't rushed. Every movement was calculated, slow, as if he was savoring every second of the situation. When he placed his hand on her shoulder, a jolt ran down her spine. She didn't know what she was doing, only that she no longer had the strength to fight back. Don't worry, he said again, a whisper now. You don't need to be afraid. But fear had flooded her. Slowly, engulfing all her senses. She couldn't run, couldn't refuse. Everything around her blurred, leaving only the sensation of him. His powerful, close presence. They stood still for a long moment, as if time had stopped. Then Mr. Mason moved, pulling her closer. His hands found the ties on her robe, peeling away each outer layer. The feeling of this invasion wasn't just physical. It was psychological. She felt like a puppet, controlled without being able to resist. But inside her, there was something unexplainable, a strange impulse, a vague wave of emotion, making her unable to understand herself. When he'd almost completely removed her robe, he paused, looking at her like a victor. Just say yes, and everything will be settled. Sarah stood there, looking at him, her heart numb. She felt the exhaustion, the despair in every breath. But there was another feeling, unexplainable, pushing her to comply. A slight nod. That's all. The decision was made. No turning back. Mr. Mason's smile was a dark triumph. Here's that passage in a more conversational, spoken English style. Mr. Mason flashed a really smug smile as he saw Sarah's decision. That self-satisfied look in his eyes made her feel like she was caught in a whirlpool with no way out. She had no choice. She could only give in. He stepped toward her, his hand still on her robe. Sarah felt his every move. Gentle but so controlling, like he was playing a game and she didn't know the rules. Don't worry, he said, his voice still soft but sharp as a knife. Everything will be fine, as long as you know what you want. Sarah couldn't look him in the eye, her gaze was hazy. Distant, everything around her seemed to fade, leaving only him and the choices she couldn't take back. She felt like a puppet, every string pulling her toward him. When he placed his hand on her chin, she could only stand there, silent, not resisting, letting his eyes sweep over every inch of her body. He sighed, then gently tucked her hair behind her ear. I thought you'd resist more. A slight smile played on his lips again. But it's okay. I understand. You need a moment to adjust. Sarah didn't respond. She felt her chest tighten. Like every emotion, every thought was being squeezed out. She couldn't cry, couldn't argue back. There was only silence and a pervasive numbness. You know, Sarah, he continued, his voice deepening, a lot of people in your situation would do what I want. And you'll be the second person I choose. She didn't dare ask about the first one. That question wasn't necessary, and she wasn't brave enough to ask anyway. She just stood there, motionless, feeling every breath she took, and every event happening around her. Everything was too fast, too sudden, and she had no time to think. Then, Mr. Mason moved even closer. He gently stroked her skin, as if his every gesture had been pre-planned. His every touch made her body tremble, not from fear, but from something unexplainable, a strange craving she couldn't control. He put his hand on her back, then slowly pulled her closer, touching her smooth skin. Sarah closed her eyes, hoping to temporarily forget everything. But deep down, she knew she couldn't escape. You really have no other choice. Sarah, we'll be done soon, Mr. Mason said, his voice smooth but clearly possessive. Sarah felt his hands move along her body, drawing her into a space she couldn't escape. This numb and hazy feeling made it hard to breathe, but a part of her wondered if this was the only choice she could make. A wave of emotions, a mix of fear and strange desire, made it impossible for her to distinguish between them. Soon enough, she felt his lips lightly touch her skin. Her skin prickled with cold waves. But there was a feeling she couldn't explain. This is the only path, Sarah, Mr. Mason whispered in her ear. And on that path, it's just you and me. She didn't reply, just quietly let him lead her. A sense of loss filled her heart. But inside there was something else. Too, a resilience, an acceptance she couldn't understand. And all she could feel now was Mr. Mason's presence. As if he had taken over every cell in her body. Every moment in her mind. She couldn't escape. She wasn't herself anymore. The feeling of possession grew stronger and stronger. Not just from physical closeness but from inside her mind. Every word Mr. Mason spoke was like an invisible string, tightening around Sarah. She felt like she was sinking into a dream she couldn't escape. Do you know what truly makes a woman strong, Sarah? He asked, his voice low, full of power. Sarah didn't answer, but her silence was like an admission. She felt her body being pulled into his presence, like a strong wave, irresistible. It's knowing how to accept everything, no matter how hard it is. He continued, his fingers gently tracing her skin, sending shivers down her spine that she couldn't control. Sarah wanted to resist, but a part of her couldn't. Every fragment of emotion was torn, unclear, unable to distinguish between fear and a strange desire she couldn't explain. Everything seemed to shatter in her head, making it impossible to focus. There was only him, only that presence. You won't get out of this, he whispered, his eyes gleaming with self-satisfaction. We won't stop until you understand. Sarah felt her body being pushed toward him, not because she wanted to, but because he wanted her to. His every movement was a rhythm, a control that made her lose control of herself. She couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, could only stand there, completely helpless. Now, you'll do what I say, he said, his tone a command. Sarah wanted to resist, wanted to scream that she didn't want this. But her words were blocked by the silence in the air. His every word was like a chain binding her to things she didn't want. Only one thought remained in her mind, she couldn't escape. Here's that passage in a more conversational, spoken English style. He lifted her chin, his eyes locking onto hers with absolute control. She couldn't turn away, couldn't avoid it. Every feeling, every thought, he just took over. And then, finally, she realized something painful. She wasn't herself anymore. She was completely in his hands. This is how you're going to live, he said, every word hitting her mind like a nail. And you'll have to accept it. The whole room seemed to stop, the air getting heavy, suffocating. Sarah felt every breath she took, each one like a fight. She couldn't resist him, couldn't fight back. She could only stand still, letting him lead her to a place she couldn't imagine. Sarah closed her eyes, but this time it wasn't about accepting, it was to stop the tears from flowing. She couldn't hear Mr. Mason's voice anymore, just her own heart pounding, each beat echoing like a warning that something was about to break. Then, like a flash of lightning in a storm, a thought exploded in her mind. She couldn't let this keep happening. Not because of pride, but because of pure survival instinct. She wasn't dead, and if she let this play out, she'd never truly live again. Sarah opened her eyes, meeting Mr. Mason's gaze. That look, cold, possessive, was exactly what made her snap. With a sudden move, she lurched back, making him stumble. Her robe slipped off one shoulder. But she didn't care. Her hand grabbed the ceramic ashtray on a nearby table. Not another step, she said, her voice steady for the first time. Mr. Mason froze, disbelief in his eyes. Sarah, what the foo? Wham! The ashtray hit his shoulder. Not hard enough to knock him down, but enough to make him step back. His face, first surprised, then turned to anger. You'll regret. No, she cut him off, her voice like ice. I've regretted enough. Silence filled the room. Mr. Mason stood there, his eyes no longer smug. Sarah was shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. She pulled her robe back up, panting. Get out of my house, she said, right now. Mr. Mason stared at her for a few more seconds, then quietly turned and left. No threats, no parting glance, just the door closing heavily, decisively, behind him. Sarah collapsed onto a chair. She didn't know if she'd won or just started a new battle. But at least, for the first time, she wasn't a puppet anymore. The door closed behind Mr. Mason, leaving a chilling silence. Sarah stood there, her whole body trembling as if she'd just survived a nightmare. No more voices, no more control from anyone else, just her. And the screaming emptiness in her mind. She sank to the floor, gasping for breath. The last tears fell, no longer carrying shame, but liberation. The fear was still there, but somewhere inside her, a seed of resistance had just been planted. She quietly walked to the small mirror on the wall. Her hair was messy, her eyes dark-rimmed, her face pale, but hidden beneath that fragile exterior was a new look. A tiny spark flickering. I'm still alive. Sarah took a deep breath. She knew Mr. Mason wouldn't give up easily. He wasn't used to rejection. He'd be back, but next time, she wouldn't be caught off guard. The next day, it was drizzling, a light mist covering the neighborhood. Sarah sat in the small coffee shop at the end of the block, gripping a hot cup of coffee. Do you think Mr. Mason can do anything? She asked, her voice low, as if afraid someone was eavesdropping. Across from her was Liam, an old coworker she'd avoided after her divorce. He had honest eyes and a reassuring calmness. He has rights regarding the lease, Liam said, but no one has the right to touch you like that. You have to call the police. Sarah shook her head. There's no evidence. No one will believe an unemployed tenant like me against a reputable real estate owner. Liam was silent, but then he placed his hand on hers. Gently. Then you need a plan. You need a way out. Sarah looked at him, for the first time in months. She saw eyes that held no scrutiny, no control, no possessiveness, just concern. 3 days later, Sarah returned to her apartment, a thick envelope in her hand, a notice to vacate, an application for housing assistance, and a letter to the police, detailing the incident with times, names, and specifics. Even without clear evidence, she would leave a trace. And more importantly, she would leave. But as she reached the door, she knew something was wrong. The lock had been changed. A paper was taped right on the door. This property has been reclaimed. No entry without permission. Sarah clutched the paper. Mr. Mason. He'd made the first move. She stood there, anger boiling, but it wasn't panic anymore. No longer weakness. She pulled out her phone, recording the paper, the door, and called Liam. You were right. I need proof. And now, I have it. Sarah was no longer the girl who bowed her head. She would fight, not just to regain her freedom, but to expose people like Mr. Mason, people who think silence means consent. And weakness is a price to pay. Do you think Sarah did the right thing by fighting back, even if it felt too late? If it were you, what would you have done differently? Leave a comment below, we want to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss powerful and emotional stories like this one. This is a true infidelity story, where every story is a wake-up call, a lesson, and a chance to start over.